What I would like to hear first now is, of course, a comment of Slavoj, but then also of Professor Bauman, the role of Europe in all this situation, and then, of course, turn to David Harvey and the role of US. As we can see, it's not only the case in Libya that it's a way of renormalization, but also in Egypt, American capital financing, the Muslim Brotherhood, and so on. So, Slavoj, please.
Very briefly, if I may, nonetheless, I wouldn't like to drag directly Europe yet into it. And
we can also do it later.
Avoid this, because some of the things I'm simply a little bit maybe confused with. For example, I deeply agree with you what you said about economic growth in the army. Okay, now strangely enough, I know a state where the army plays exactly the same role. This state is called Cuba, as we all know. I have the data there. I have the data. State is even in tourism and so on. No. Now, okay, now there will be blood, maybe. So let me go on. Also, incidentally, when you mentioned Carter, no, I still think, I will provoke horror with this, he was relatively the most honest American president. The proof, as I made you know, he's now practically isolated in this new Zionist wave in the United States. His book, where he called what Israelis are doing in Palestine apartheid. Not only this, but do you know that my friend Udi Aloni, radical anti-Zionist, blah, 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 told me that he saw Carter recently demonstrating close to the, well, so no, I'm not celebrating in any way Carter, just there are much worse than Carter. But more fundamentally, sorry. Yes, serious points, let's forget it. Okay, a couple of
democracy and totalitarianism.
Oh, sorry,
just
quickly, if I may problematize this. First, I agree basically with Samir Amir's analysis, but my point is, nonetheless, to what extent can we really talk about anti-capitalism? My first complication. Listen, what is happening in Libya and Syria, these were not exactly the models of capitalist country. So I would find it a little bit problematic to claim this. I think on the contrary that, and that's the battle that you described that's going on today. What took place till now can still, and that's the whole effort of the West, can still be contained in this typically anti-capitalist logic, which is part of today's capitalism, where I hope you notice in all the media you read this false criticism of bad, corrupted capitalism here and there, with the implication we have to get rid of the corrupted people and have what? Honest capitalism. No, I'm not saying this is happening, my God. I'm just saying that I can well see even the way you mentioned its fight against corruption, authority, and so on and so on. These are, I mean, sorry, but now to provoke you. If this is anti-capitalism, then Hitler was a great anti-capitalist. Read Hitler, I did. Hitler's main point is against plutocratic capitalism. That's not enough. Critique of capitalism must pass.
Žižek, do you accept that I would disagree with almost everything that Karl says?
The next part, anti-imperialism, agree on one condition, that you add also newly emerging imperialist powers of BRIC, who was most deeply skeptical about Egyptian uprising in its real answers, China. You cannot read the basic result of the latest China Congress, which was, as we know, enormous rise for internal security.
This is indeed an additional disagreement. Thank you.
Yeah, no, because again, I think that, let's be frank, China is sometimes better than United States. Definitely. Sometimes it's not. What China is doing in
nobody can be worse than the US anyway. That's difficult.
Today,
in any circumstance.
Sorry?
Today, of course, but I'm not speaking of 100 years ago.
Frankly, I don't buy this stuff that China is somehow nonetheless because it was socialist, more better.
We are not saying that.
Okay, I have more, but let's have blood.
That is enough disagreements to allow me to have some short comment. One, Cuba and the army. No phenomenon can be separated from the other phenomenon and the analysis of the global, the society as a whole. So there is nothing, we cannot compare in one sentence the Cuban army, the Egyptian army, the French army, the army in Croatia, and the army in China, and so on, and just say the army. Second, I don't go into whether Carter was honest or dishonest. I'm not interested in that. But what was the policy of the US establishment during the past at least 30 last years? It has been continuously and constantly, whether honest or dishonest, whether Democrat or Republican, following the same targets, the same fundamental targets of US imperialism and leadership of the collective imperialism of the triad with the European behind. Third, but this is more important, in what respect the movement in Egypt is anti-capitalist. And I'm not going to mix it with Libya, Syria, and so on, because from one country to another, it is totally different. The conditions and the uprising, call it as you want, you cannot speak of the Arab world in general and try to characterize beyond platitudes the uprisings. In the case of Egypt, it is clearly potentially anti-capitalist because it is fundamentally anti-imperialist and it is fundamentally social. I'm not saying socialist, that is an alternative to the ongoing and deepening inequalities which have been produced by really existing capitalism. And that is, of course, not anti-capitalist in the sense that with a high level of consciousness of a socialist target and a socialist project, of course. But it is factually, in struggle, potentially anti-capitalist. And that is the reason for which the United States, Saudi Arabia and Israel
and China.
No, I'll come to China. I'll come to China later. Not China for sure. The enemies, the intimate allies, intimate friends and enemies simultaneously of the Egyptian people are the United States, Saudi Arabia and Israel. Because the three of them have one common target, that is to make impossible the Egyptian movement to make revolutionary advances, I'm not saying revolution, in the direction of the democratization of the society, which we cannot be but associated with, again, social progress, which opens the socialist potential perspective, but nothing more, and which is necessarily anti-imperialist. Now, this is why, and secularization, of course, as democratization of the society. This is why in Egypt the battle is not against corruption. That is the image that the image that the media give of Egypt. Corruption is a byproduct of the system, normal associated product in the system of existing capitalism as it is. It is not, oh, we want a good capitalism without corruption. This can be said on the medias of the West. It is not said in the streets in Egypt. Now, so don't take something very minor and present it as the characteristic as the Western media. And now, finally, on China. China is for sure not socialist and Mao never said that China was socialist, but was starting in the first primitive stage towards socialism. Anyway, China's policy today and that of all the other emerging countries, they do not belong to the imperialist triad. The monopoly capital which is dominant at global level are monopoly capital from the US, Western Europe, I do not include Croatia in that, even if it is in the European Union, and Japan, full stop. And for them, China is an enemy, is not an ally. Even if China has chosen and has been successful in integrating the global system for a certain period to its benefit, and that was interlinked, of course, with the battle between capitalism and socialism, or the capitalist tendency and the socialist tendency within the Chinese society, and this is going on. And therefore, to say the caricature scenario that what is changing in the world the same, but the US hegemony will be replaced by the Chinese hegemony doing the same tomorrow. China is a country where the pattern of imperialism cannot have a social basis, because the social basis of imperialism is came with late capitalism, while China remains a country where the absorption of the immense majority of the peasantry into a capitalist development cannot be possible and create the objective conditions for what has been social democracy in Western imperialist countries. And therefore, that doesn't mean that the Chinese diplomacy is always good at all, and that when they support this or that dictator, they are right. No, at all. It doesn't mean that when they come to negotiate with this or that government to get land or to get access to oil exploitation, they are not to a certain extent doing exactly what the imperialists do at all. But to oversimplify immensely the picture and say that Chinese is just a capitalist country, imperialist like the others, is, excuse me, nonsense.
I have to add something, and then you can have the next two. And I will continue from this last word of Samir, oversimplifying, because your sentence was made as if American policies have been always made by American presidents, which is really nonsense. The president in America is just a person for the media, but the policies are done wherever else. And I mean...
by monopoly capital.
Yes, sure. By monopoly capital...
Obama should not have said, yes, we can. He should have said, no, we cannot. Because the election of the president in the US is of absolutely no importance, as long as the real master of this country is monopoly capital and nothing else.
Maybe before that, I think David Harvey, just to be politically correct, and not just to be politically correct, but to give some word also to David Harvey and to Zygmunt Bauman, I think